Welcome back to the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story about the change coming in the Democratic Party. Oh, the change, Alex. You talked about the change before. I think this framing from Axios is probably the most on point, reminiscent, while also providing a nice segue into the potential divide that will present itself again in this next era. It's just now whether the Democrats will actually choose it. So with that, we're going to ask our daily debate, which is, do you see a moderate Democratic Party coming out of the next wave of the Democratic candidates? I think that many of them, the Graham Plattners of the world, the new mayor who just took over in the Northwest, I believe it's Seattle, all of these candidates seem to be more progressive. The energy seems to be with the progressive base, and yet this new Texas race actually opens the path for a more moderate in line with the rest of the Democratic Party, at least on a lot of social issues, not so much, but on economic issues. And I think that's an interesting path that is possibly more viable. But hey, maybe that's just my opinion. So with that, throw your comment down in the comment section. And now we're going to jump to our article from Axios today. Headline reads, Dem face a Tea Party-style revolt in Texas and beyond in 2026 races. So for those of you who don't know, Representative Crockett, Jasmine Crockett, just stepped into the Democratic Senate primary race, and it's looking like she is the front runner. Some polls have her at roughly 38% of the potential vote, I believe. 31%. Tallarico is backed at 25% and Allred at 13%. Tallarico and Allred actually seem to have very different political stances, but they're more closer to the Texas Democratic Party old guard than they are to Jasmine Crockett's new brand of Democrat. And that's not to say that she's inherently a radical. I think on some social issues, she would be much further along than people on the left, but generally she has inline, old school, neo-lib perspectives on a lot of different issues. That's not to say that she doesn't make a ruckus, that she doesn't have a new style, which is not in the lexicon or the tactics that would normally be displayed by somebody in the Democratic Party. But nowadays, you kind of have to be loud and proud in order to make it to the top. So let's actually read the first paragraph here. Quote, hours after former NFL star Colin Allred quit the Texas Senate race Monday, rabble-rousing Rep. Jasmine Crockett jumped in, the latest sign that Democrats are facing a Tea Party-style revolt by progressives. And Axios' position here that she's inherently progressive. Once again, I think a lot of words, a lot of mincing will be done that she's progressive, and yet her voting record seems pretty down-the-aisle Democrat. Now, in a party that is leaning more progressive, that has a Hakeem Jeffries rather than a Nancy Pelosi, maybe, and let's be clear, Hakeem's not that far to the left either, though in his rhetoric he tries to be. Maybe that seems completely in line with the direction of the Democratic Party, but I think it's a little bit to jump ahead and call her a lefty. Then again, maybe I'm out of pocket on that one. So let's actually get a little bit more context here. Quote, Crockett, 44, has built a huge online following and fundraising base on the left through her high-profile feuds with Donald Trump, but many top Democrats doubt she could win a general election in conservative Texas. Crockett, who represents the deep blue district in Dallas, has made several controversial comments that top Democrats fear would turn off swing voters, such as calling wheelchair-bound Texas Governor Greg Abbott Hot Wheels, and suggesting that some on the right are inherently violent. Mainstream Democrat officials, including those in Schumer's orbit, have been impressed with Tallarico, sources told Axios. Tallarico, 36, an inspiring minister who quotes the Bible in his criticism of Trump and the far right, has appeared on Joe Rogan's popular podcast. Now, look at those two in opposition with one another. A Bible-thumping, blue dog Democrat, at least in orientation and in public marketing, versus a new age Democrat taking advantage of the online bully pulpit in order to get her point across without necessarily needing to be too liable on her votes and her stances within the House. Which one of those do you think would win? Which one of those positions, if you were to compare them to any part in the past, would have a chance of getting through a general election? For all the talk from Axios that this is a Tea Party moment, that the progressives are rounding up the caucus and they're going to lock things in, I think it has a little bit less to do with if she does win. Let's be clear. I think it's still a hard race in conservative Texas, especially with Paxton being the potential candidate on the other side who also has state recognition. Then again, they point out Jasmine Crockett has the ability to raise lots of money. That's fair. But if we were to compare this to any political race that goes to a larger scale once out of the primaries, the clean-cut candidate, the one who relies on the institutions and speaks to things that everybody knows reliably, or the loudmouth, I think this sounds more like a 2016 MAGA moment, a MAGA takeover of the party, rather than a Tea Party takeover of the party. A Tea Party takeover of the party is meant to harken back to underlying principles, the ones that have been left behind by the party. And I don't know if you could claim that the liberals, that the Democrats right now are not living up to their liberal underlyings, their underpinnings. Maybe you could say that they're not socially conscious enough, that they're not fighting enough for the working man. I'd be amenable to an argument like that, but a Tea Party moment feels like an unfair comparison. It feels more like a Make America Social Again moment, something to that effect. There's got to be a cute little play on words that somebody on the left can use in order to try to channel some of this energy that Donald Trump was so effective at ginning up and getting to the ballot box. But what else is there? What are those in context should we be looking at here? Quote, many traditional Democrats were backing Allred, a former U.S. House member, before he dropped out and chose to seek a House seat again. He said Monday that a bruising Senate Democratic primary and runoff would prevent the Democratic Party from going into this crucial election unified. And then Axios wants to pull out. They want to talk about the broader effects here. Quote, it's all unfolding amid an inter-party rebellion that's drawn some comparisons to how the conservative Tea Party movement reshaped the GOP nearly 2 decades ago. They talk about Maine with Graham Plattner. They talk about Haley Stevens versus Abdul El Said in Michigan, which Bernie Sanders has backed a few different progressive candidates. So I'm not trying to limit the scope of this Tea Party revolution, this change of the guard, this moment of political rebellion. I'm not trying to say that there aren't plenty of races that could very well lean progressive and lead to a bigger squad, so to speak. But I think this is not the quintessential example. I think the more quintessential example of that would be Graham Plattner, the person who came into D.C. His story is actually more quintessential in the overturning of D.C. He went to university in D.C. He served his nation. He went into the belly of the beast, and he came out a man that saw a nation stripped of motivation, kindness, empathy, for the people who it needed to support most. I think that would be the progressive equivalent of a Tea Party movement, to reorient towards that. And I think he is a much better example of that than Jasmine Crockett, who really does feel like she's in it for her own gain, her own social media gain, her own popular gain, so to speak. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. I want to know what you have to say. I want you to throw your comment down there. Is Jasmine Crockett in it for the wrong reason? Is this not the next Tea Party? Is this the next Tea Party? All these different opinions are more than encouraged, and I want to hear your perspectives, and maybe we'll go back and forth in the comments. And if you want to read this entire article, it will be linked in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as now on Apple Podcasts. And if you want to follow the Twitter handle, it's down there at your DailyFlip, where I post links to these episodes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the 6 and 6 podcast on Tuesday and Thursday. This week's going to be a little bit different, so if you made it this far, here's the update. We're actually going to be releasing 3 episodes of this podcast back to back. A few of them are going to be a little bit different than normal. They're going to be future focus kind of like an old series that we used to do, and I'll post a repost of a Future Focus episode on Monday. But I'm mass recording them. I'm literally going to turn this off and I'm going to move straight on to the next story because I have a trip to go on. So we're going to put out all of them in succession, and I don't want to be doing a lot of current news stuff when I'm going to be out of the cycle for at least 2 or 3 days by the time we go live. So with that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.